Tours. This is his first set of points for the year. He's gone 0 Ironforge all the way through Stormwind, but has picked up the 11 already here in Undercity. Of course, not particularly relevant because he is already in possession of one of those coveted Grandmaster spots, but still a good opportunity for him to assert some dominance, put some fear into the hearts of all those other APAC GMs, as well as, of course, as putting a nice chunk of prize money in his pocket at the end of the day.
I want to quickly chat about his Druid deck there that we glossed over while we were sort of hyping him up a little. He is playing the Anaconda and still playing the Glowflies. He's never been scared to play things his way. That's pretty rare to have both in the same deck these days, right?
It has evolved a little bit, yeah, to the point where, you know, Pheno has very much requested that we call it Pheno Druid. So
Sure.
we are going with... More so, people have switched towards the Mr. Smite Druid, which is the pirate version that we've been seeing more and more. But honestly, I think this is still perhaps the superior version of the deck overall. Like, Mr. Smite is exciting, new toys and so on. It kind of supports that Jerry-Rig Carpenter as well. See a little bit of that in GivePLZ deck building, where he only has one Jerry-Rig Carpenter coming in to this deck to split open those nourishes, get all of that extra card draw available. But this is much more so the Gabby/Blyze build that we saw them use to absolutely terrorize people throughout Grandmasters all of last season.
And how do you think that this particular deck stacks up against XiaoT's lineup? I've got it down as looking slightly wobbly, but nothing too terrifying.
Slightly wobbly is a fair assessment, I think. Yeah, I think with Anaconda Druid, it doesn't have that many matchups. I know Raven was talking about these kind of dynamics before, where it's sometimes too easy to convince yourself that a deck has a really bad matchup because you queue it a few times and you lose a matchup really badly. But the point with Anaconda Druid is that in just about any given matchup, you can put something together that just blows straight through everything that your opponent is trying to do and just does something way, way too powerful. And then you end up winning the matchup by a lot. And so instead of like, oh, I won this matchup by loads or I lost this matchup by loads, it's just a straight statistical analysis of, well, how often do I win the matchup by loads versus how often do I lose the matchup by loads. So it can be hard to get a handle on the exact performance of a deck as polarizing as Anaconda Druid, but I do think your assessment is pretty on the money. A little bit wobbly, but nothing to be too concerned about for GivePLZ.
That's one of the opportunities that these big playtest groups have, of course. They don't have to rely on just their own observations. They can have discussions and talk about, hey, what did you think about it? Rather than just saying, hey, my experience was I lost really badly. Or in my case, I lose really well, Sottle. I can lose with the best of them.
You are. If there's one thing I can say about you, you are fantastic at losing.
I do it so accurately. Right, GivePLZ. A weird hand here for the matchup. He'll be tempted by this Solar Eclipse, but it's not useful for any time soon at all.
No, and even going the other way, like, whenever you get Lightning Bloom in situations like this, you're like, well, okay, I can double up on Lightning Bloom this turn, triple up on Lightning Bloom even with the one that he already has in hand, but still not really anything super exciting to pay that off immediately. Like, there are hands that you get with this opening curve where, you know, replace that Cenarian Ward with a Celestial Alignment, for example, and you're like, oh, cool, turn 2 Celestial Alignment. That sounds awesome. Let's do that. But then even in that situation, against Handlock in particular, we talked about the Anaconda Druid in the matchup as a whole, but in this particular matchup against this particular deck, it's a really scary matchup to navigate because Celestial Alignment honestly sometimes favors your opponent's deck more than it does yours in terms of just the sheer power level of stuff that they can throw out immediately. Almost certainly any giants in hand will already be free. You know, a Netheron is another giant, another minion that can come down for 1 mana, not to mention the Baron Scavengers and the Gnolls. Gnolls will also end up being free in that scenario. So you can play Alignment and your opponent can then immediately dump 30 odd power onto the board immediately, and you're just left holding the bag like, oh, hang on, this is what I was supposed to do. Like, I've built my deck to do this thing, and you've just done it for me. So very often, you sometimes try and scrape your way out of this matchup by just playing more token druid style or big Cenarian Ward minions, like ramp into Cenarian Ward, because there's one thing Warlock does struggle with, it's removing individual big minions from the board most of the time. So looking at the hand now, Solar Cenarian, as you were talking about earlier, that is a route to victory, but he's just a little bit short of being able to do it. And now, as early as now, in the words of Gia, he has those big decisions to make, and you can see quite wisely choosing to turn down that rushed out Celestial Alignment because of all of those reasons I was highlighting on the previous turn.
Yeah, luckily for me, you went long enough that I didn't get to say how good I thought the Solar Eclipse actually might be. It can double it with Moonlit Guidance, it can double it with Fungal Fortunes, potentially an Overgrowth as well. And so it gave him a lot of choices. I was going to say he's almost certain to rip something off the top of his deck that helps now. And then he drew the alignment and I was saved by the bell.
You love to see it. XiaoT just generating minions on board, as is the want for Warlock in this matchup. Even those 5/4 nulls are likely to stick around long term. Druid, I talked about how Warlock's big issue is, removing huge minions from the board, individual big minions. Druid's weakness is just minions. You can get everything out of that sentence apart from the word minions and remain 100% accurate with the situation. A 5/4 or 2 5/4s in this case is going to put an incredibly rapid clock onto GivePLZ here, and yeah, he is just finding the wrong half of his deck right now. This is all the alignment Anaconda half of his deck and none of the token half of his deck, which he is choosing to put in there on purpose, but it's not really playing ball with him right now.
Yeah, I actually quite like having the token half in there, but like you say, when you draw like this, you start to question your choices a little bit. Again, not saying they are wrong or right. He's in the top 16 once again. He's in the top 8 once again. So he's doing something right, but it sometimes just looks grim. Right, XiaoT will be looking to use this window of opportunity to just put on maximum pressure at this point. He's got a wide range of options. I assume he's going to be in somewhat of a hurry, though, because he'll be scared that GivePLZ is doing nothing.
Yeah, I mean, Null Army is a very real possibility on this turn if he wants to go for it. Double Raise Dead already in hand. He can choose to really just try and turbo out a bunch of 5/4s here and just say that that represents enough pressure to get this done. But throwing out the Tour Guide as a first action this turn, that will push the Flesh Giant down to 4, but still not playable on this turn. If he throws out a Raise Dead, he will be able to get that 8/8 in play though.
Okay. Great thing against Druid is you have so little to worry about in these spots. You've just got to almost solo play it in these situations. Work out how do I kill my opponent in 2 turns. This looks a pretty good way of doing it.
Does indeed.
Does get the chance to play the Solar Snow with that pickup of the Lightning Bloom though.
Okay. These are going to need to be the bliziest of all 8s you have ever seen in your life, though. Needs to be able to contest the 8/8. That's pretty good. I mean, okay, we'll take it. Moderate outcome.
Moderate. What happens to your 8 drops when you play this game? That looks like an amazing outcome to me, although he did need a particularly amazing outcome, to be fair.
Yeah.
He's thoroughly excited by the outcome himself.
I built him up. One of the most exciting, expressive players you will ever see in all of APAC falls asleep on camera. Yeah, thanks, buddy.
It's always the way, Soto. You should know better after all these years. No matter what you say, the players will somehow divine it and just do the exact opposite.
13 cards left remaining, a little ways away from those Baron's Scavenger. Did pick up the Shadowblade Slinger, having dealt 3 damage to self with the backfire, and that is another Raise Dead sneaking over on that left-hand side, but he does have the Altar of Fire to delete these last 3 remaining cards if he wants to have a real power turn now with those Baron Scavengers.
Well, his opponent has declared that he can't deal with this board, and he's only got 4 mana next turn. So pile on the pressure while you can.
Going to use Shadowblade Slinger alongside a Scavenger. Yeah, okay. I think it was pretty close between this and the Null on this turn. Breakpoint's just not really ideal, both in terms of mana and damage. The Shadowblade Slinger only doing 6, for example, meant that the Tour Guide couldn't take care of the Moarg on the other side. The way the hand space worked meant that the Null couldn't come down alongside the Shadowblade Slinger to just straight up deal with the Moarg in terms of rush damage and push everything face. But yeah, first world problems for real for XiaoT quickly on that turn, because just Knoll into Giant with such a slow meandering start from GivePLZ on the other side just wasn't really able to get there. But that is a tough matchup. It was a tough matchup going in. Probably, again, out of the matchup as a whole, 3 decks versus 3 decks, he'll feel like he can get Anaconda out, but having queued that matchup first, he probably would have had a feeling he was in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, when I was sort of doing my pre-match breakdown, looking at through the decks, it feels to me like the important one here is going to be XiaoT's OTK Demon Hunter versus this Druid. That's where the Druid gets its big chance to get out of trouble, and that is the matchup that may well swing this for me. But XiaoT would be glad to see that Warlock out of the way after the thrills of his first match of the day too.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It was an incredible series for sure up against Fury Hunter. You know, I mentioned how Tianming kind of put on an exhibition. Fury Hunter versus XiaoT kind of delivered on every front as well, even though there was a suspicion of a Miss Lethal in there for Fury, which he might be ruining. But don't worry too much about it. You're a Grandmaster. You can make up for it next year, I'm sure. But XiaoT is the player here. He is the player very much in charge of that rivalry versus Fury Hunter, and he is the player now marching forward alongside various other players with it who were in this top 16 to begin with for a continued China dominance of Masters Tours. And it really is now approaching this point where even I, Europe's region #1 cheerleader, might have to face facts that China is the superior region if it comes down to another Chinese victor this time around.
Yeah, you hung on to the 50-50 narrative for some time because it was true, and you're, a neutral, respectable journalist and all that good stuff. Yeah. But that is just starting to slip a little bit. We shall see at the end of this one how far it has slipped. I want to talk quickly about the Warrior because XiaoT is playing the hits you in the face version, but he's had to ban GivePLZ's Warrior, which is the hits you slightly less in the face version. Any thoughts on Warriors in general for this tournament?
Yeah, hit you in the face, but also clear your board sometimes, and also maybe not die with a big spiky plank version of the deck. Yeah, he is playing a very aggressive curve of Pirates, still has Bloodsail Raiders and the Whetstone Hatchet and all of those early drops that you want to be having. Bloodsail Deckhand as well, of course. But then in GivePLZ's version, he's sneaking in the Barov, the Bulwark, the Ranker, everything else alongside. So you actually have that a little bit of extra security, particularly I think he's leaning towards being resilient against some of the other combo decks, such as Mizaki Mage, OTK Demon Hunter, that kind of thing, because he actually has a Mutinous thrown in there as well in the top end alongside the Bulwark of Azzinoth and the extra armor gain. So I would imagine what is being lent towards there from GivePLZ with his build of the deck. But honestly, from what I've been watching, I've been more and more impressed just with kind of the smooth curve Pirate Warrior, right? The low curve, aggressive, hit you really hard Pirate Warrior. That's been the one that's seemed to be the most impressive to me so far in a vacuum. But again, you can't really ever analyze a decision like that just in terms of, well, I think this deck just looks higher power level overall. It's all holistic, right? It's all about how your lineup comes together as a whole. Tech cards here and there can cover weaknesses, gain you 2 or 3% in a couple of matchups here and there, and that just might improve your chances overall, even outside of the really obvious things of like, well, I'm playing this version of the deck because it supports my hard target strategy that I'm going for on one of these decks.
GivePLZ doesn't seem to have any need for greed in this lineup. That was a question that Raven threw at me. I'm going to throw it at you. Need for greed, yay or nay?
Yeah, for me, I think it does improve the deck overall enough to be worth the inclusion for sure. I think there's 1 or 2 cards that were floating around in Demon Hunter where Need for Greed does come and make a spot. I know people had concerns over time because of the rules of card text goes last and all that good stuff. Like if you top deck it on a Kurtrus turn, that's kind of a weird interaction, right? But it still works out totally fine in the long run, I think, to be worthwhile. And just draw 3 on demand is just a very, very powerful effect for what the deck is trying to do.
So what he does have instead in this lineup of it is, I'm going to say a Viper. Yeah, he's got a Viper in there, which we don't see that much anymore because it's not particularly a weapon meta. If you see a weapon, you tend to be kind of dead. So it's just one of those judgment calls going in, especially after the nerfs were, reminder, only last Tuesday. So even though the decks have been around a while, all the interactions, all the nuances, all the slight changes led people to reach slightly different tech decisions. Thank goodness.
And again,
really boring.
I beat the crap out of this drum on a very, very regular basis, but it's because I think it's true. GivePLZ in his lineup is playing Warrior with Bulwark of Azzinoth, right? So when you do that, you then probably believe that that's a good decision and other people will be doing it as well. And that leads you then to make decisions like, well, if other people are going to do this smart thing that I've done and put Bulwark of Azzinoth in their Warrior, I should play Rustrock Viper in my OTK Demon Hunter.
Yep, that's something I've actually observed as well. I don't think I've heard you say it that many times. You've got far bigger drums than that particular one. Enough of soft, big drums. She'll continue with the match in progress. And XiaoT, as the Pirates tend to do, is putting on that early damage. And this is where having the backup plan of being able to play Rakara is good against Demon Hunter, who is capable of clearing your board and healing out of sight.
Yeah, if it wasn't for Rakara, like if this was just straight up Pirate Warrior, right? You curved out, you tried to hit your opponent as hard as possible, and then, oh, damn, I'm out of stuff, I guess I lose. Then Demon Hunter might be able to do the thing where they just, like old school Face Hunter strat, right? Clear your board a couple of times, Fell Screen Blast, heal up to full, stick a couple of Moargs, and then tempo out from there and win the game with like some discovered minions from your Illidari studies and your 4-8 Il'gynoth and win the game. But you're not going to be able to do that against Pirate Warrior because Juggernaut will single-handedly just take over the game if you leave yourself without your combo win condition. So that then trickles down and says, well, now that you actually have to keep combo pieces, you have to be greedy with your Moarg, you have to be greedy with your I-beams and your Fell Screen Blasts, right? You have to make sure you keep those resources available for you over the long term, and it means that significantly less instances of the full Reno heal can come out in one given game for the Demon Hunter.
I was going to say, what's the strategy for the Pirates? Well, you play the minions and you hit them in the face. Move on. Great. Good talk. If they've got bigger numbers on the left-hand side, they're more likely to hit the opponent in the face for more damage. Great. Off you go.
Yep. This is one of those TJ Sanders specials, search bar decks, where you just search the word pirate, you put them all in your deck, and then you play cards that say pirate on them every turn. Nice.
And it works just a treat. I'm actually surprised this deck didn't completely and utterly take over this tournament. Obviously, the knowledge that it's there is something you have to worry about when building your lineups, and it doesn't seem to be picking up infinite bans. I guess that's because Demon Hunter itself is still pretty powerful, and obviously, depending on lineup, there's other things you want to ban. Hunter being banned this time around, for instance.
That I-beam off the top was a draw there on the last step. Now gives GivePLZ some options on this turn. Sniping down a 2-3 certainly looks very reasonable here, but of course, as I mentioned, you do have to think about long-term greed with those healing effects, and maybe using an I-beam to heal for 3 is just not enough in this situation. 2-3 not representing a massive amount of pressure on the board compared to what a captain or a cannoneer would be doing, for example. Yeah, GivePLZ choosing to use his health as a resource for another turn or two in this spot, which I really like. He has plenty of bounce back ability in hand right now, right? With a 0 mana Fell Screen Blast, bunch of spell damage, Moargs, he can quite easily go back to full on demand at any given point.
And given how much you have to go through in this deck, that I-beam might not just be a health gaining resource. You might actually need it to win the game. There will be things go missing from the combo during the next few turns, which leaves you very thin on the ground as the Demon Hunter. So might just need it to do an extra 6 damage at the end of the game or something. Play some pirates.
Ah, but which pirates, Neil? That's the question.
I never thought of it like that. That's what I'm doing wrong. I'm a search bar player. I just search pirates and play the first one that pops up.
So there's a couple of options here, right? You can go freebooter, swing the weapon, re-equip the weapon, that kind of thing, or you could just choose to curve out completely. He is, in the end, choosing to go with the former of those two options. Gets the double boom to accompany it as well for that 4 extra damage. And now very rapidly, turn 5, and GivePLZ is already going to have to be pressed into parting ways with one of his big Reno Jackson heals.
Absolutely. And of course, while he's been doing all this, the quest hasn't advanced. I mean, it has advanced on this occasion, but it often hasn't advanced as far as you would like. And this turn, it won't be advancing very far, I don't think.
Yeah, these are the turns that hurt, right? Because not only is this losing a bunch of combo pieces and a bunch of healing, and those healing cards are also lethal cards for you in the long run, it also means that you are probably going to have to interrupt quest progression, and then that is going to slow down your own win condition, your own Kurtrus further down the line.
Let's look at XiaoT's previous turn, by the way. Having the 4 attacks on the new weapon with a Ratchet Privateer in hand will have been part of that thought process. That's just ongoing more damage while he finishes off the Juggernaut part of the game that he's doing currently.
Enough time.
Chaos Leech, very welcome in terms of what I was saying about you know, you need some way to kill your opponent once you've burned through half of your combo pieces almost here, and Chaos Leech is a good way to just do chunky damage at the end of the game. You may have to cobble the damage together one way or another if he gets that far. And now we enter this weird... You go.
I was going to say, really strong response turn from XiaoT here, because, you know, quite often the big issue here is that you don't really have an ability to deal with the Moarg in spots like this, but XiaoT has no such concerns, and actually picking up Cult Neophyte for the long term. This is, again, something that I think XiaoT has got absolutely spot on for this metagame. We were having a little debate before the tournament on one of the days where we were just prepping some decks, trying to get a handle on some things. I was asking the question, like, there's very little Cult Neophyte hanging around on ladder right now in comparison to what we've seen before. Like, is that right? Should we really be cutting Cult Neophyte from our decks? And I think against an average ladder meta, you know, maybe it makes sense, some of the Neophytes that have been cut. But I think when you look at the high-performing decks in this tournament, you know, the Mazaki Mages, the Garrote Rogues, the OTK Demon Hunters that you're seeing, you know, cream rise to the top, as you get to the end of the tournament, you're starting to see more and more of those decks. Having that Cult Neophyte, even now in Pirate Warrior, is proving to be very advantageous, and we saw some of that in the previous series against Fury Hunter, right?
Absolutely, a Fury Hunter with basically a full combo lineup, as near to it as you're going to get anyway. Those Neophytes put in a lot of good work across the board and got XiaoT over the line. I don't think he'd got there without the Neophytes. Obviously, Neophyte in Warlock is just a thing that happened, and that's kind of important in that matchup too, but even so, I think XiaoT has called it just right. Just the right amount of tournament tech cards. I prefer it to sort of putting the Rancors and such like. But again, like you've already said, it is how you see the meta. And all of these people have called it well enough to get into the top 8 from a 400-player field.
Not enough time.
Oh.
XiaoT choosing to go with the Cult Neophyte for this turn. Now, I suppose trying to disrupt the quest completion, which he's done pretty well. This is an annoying turn for GivePLZ now to have to complete this, and you see that he just chooses to throw away an Immolation Aura there. So job done for XiaoT. He did manage to slow down the option for the opponent, interrupt that quest progress, and now he has further decisions to make on this turn as to how he wants to progress this. I'm not sure where he is on quest completion, whether it's 1 or 2 on this turn, but the fear of glide, of course, is something that you do have to keep in mind as to whether or not you ever want to have Captain Rakara in your hand at the end of the turn, or whether you want to guarantee landing it by powering it out on the same turn that you actually complete that quest.
Because it's such a favourable matchup for the Warrior, you don't want it in your hand. I'm certain of this after my amazing sample size over the last day or two. It's kind of the way you throw. If it's a 50-50 matchup, I think it's a far more interesting discussion about keeping quest pieces in hand and so on. But when you're favoured, you don't give your opponent the outside chance to stop you from being favoured. Judging by the time he's taking, I think the quest might be on 1 out of 2.
Nope.
No.
Just the decision of which one he wanted to play in that spot. Nothing to worry about that turn at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, he had to choose which one, that's what I mean. He was on 1 out of 2, blah, blah. Gets the positioning correct as well. I know it's automatic for these players at this point, but I always like to highlight it because this can go horribly wrong against Demon Hunt if you put things in the wrong way round as well. Just a 7-7. Forget all the stuff that comes next. You've got to waste so many resources just getting rid of a 7-7. If you could just ignore it for a turn or two and hope the Juggernaut whiffed, you wouldn't be in a terrible spot. But you can't ignore it. It's huge.
It's just amazing how quickly damage compounds from this point. Like, I've been in spots, you know, when this deck first started appearing, first started to be a regular occurrence on ladder. I'd queue into it. This kind of board would be on the other side, right, representing somewhere in the region of 15 damage. I mean, like, well, I'm at 28. Like, who cares? And then all of a sudden, it's just, you know, a Mr. Smite appearing, and then 1 or 2 pirates played from hand, or it's a Gore Howl appearing. Like, it doesn't have to be both of those things. It can very often just be one or the other. But GivePLZ deciding that there is not a great deal he can do about it in this situation, gets the Kurtrus on board to at least soak up some of the cannon damage, but still that is a monstrous amount of damage coming through on the other side.
Yeah, he's kind of declared that next turn I'm having a super turn. I think the next turn he probably needs a super turn because he's going to be dead. Does have the glide going into it. For XiaoT, he's just got to play around worst cases, which is always one of the hardest things in Hearthstone, because a lot of the time you don't get to learn these. You have to work them out as you go because you don't get punished. If it's a worst case, it doesn't happen very often. Obviously, must make sure that he has lethal on board going into next turn. That's the #1 thing he must do. Just going to ignore Kurtrus. Amazing. And this just gives him so many out. Even if something terrifying happens, unless he's dead next turn, there's so many outs, even in the worst case scenario here, right? There's cannonballs and there's Gore Howls, even if somehow GivePLZ isn't in this world of trouble going into the next turn.
Yeah, absolutely. He's going to need some help, and he's going to need it quickly, and none of those really look like help in this situation. Gone are the days when Skull was basically the nuts outcome from Illidari studies in every occasion. He's going to take it because it's about the only useful option in any world in that spot, but still I would imagine it's a little bit too ambitious to be playing on this turn. You see that straight away as he rips the tradable, pushing it out of outcast position, but that Chaos Leech he picked up earlier is now looking like a fairly useful addition to this turn.
So one of the things he could mess around with here is sort of Guild Trader, Leech, clear basically everything with auras and stuff and leave himself just with Skull Glide. See where that gets him.
Yep, very true.
Sounds ridiculous, but there's only 12 cards left in his deck and they're reduced, and Skull will reduce them further. So there's the opportunity to win next turn.
I like it. 7 damage clean to the Rakara, heal for the 7, Immolation Aura clears up everything else, call that your turn. You do clear your own board, you know that the board is coming back on the other side for the Warrior, but it did look like your best out in that position.
Just eat another 4, why don't you?
Oh, it's so much damage, it's just constant. It's the amount of damage that they can add from hand. All of these cards just saying deal extra damage on them. And now putting GivePLZ down to 4, it won't be enough even just to clear the board at this point, because he has 4 damage guaranteed to XiaoT on the following turn at a bare minimum. So GivePLZ needs to heal. Picking up I-Beam is certainly going to go some way of doing that. But you know, you mentioned previous turn when he's left himself with a Glide and a Skull in the hand. That Glide is in a very unfortunate position in GivePLZ's hand now for the way this is going.
I-Beam, Skull, close your eyes, try to live one more turn, and then try to live one more turn. It's just impossible. It's not impossible, but it's just so hard, right? This is what we talked about right at the start. This is phase 2. So phase 1, the Demon Hunter survives. Phase 2, Juggernaut survives.
Just chooses to play Skull from mid-hand instead, which is absolutely fine in this deck post-Kurtrus, because it's very rare you're going to save a significant amount of mana with the Outcast Skull anyway, choosing to try and get some extra juice potentially out of that I-Beam, which he can now get. Double draws off the Acrobatics, looking for more Moargs, looking for more Fell Screen Blasts.
It's a 3-4, I guess. I just think how useless the Viper is, but he thought about it and then he considered saving it just in case the Bulwark comes up, because he's got to try and win next turn, but he needs something on the board to eat up those cannonballs.
Yeah, makes sense. Could have chosen to trade it in that situation to look for a bigger heal, perhaps off the Fell Screen Blast, but the problem is that second Fell Screen Blast in this spot, and Beam has just been used on the other side. South Sea Captain off the top means that XiaoT is now 2-0 in this series. Went 2-0 up in the round of 16 game against Fury Hunter, I believe. Fury Hunter made a real fight of it, but that was a very clean game of Pirate Warrior from GiaoT. And I do want to highlight those 2 turns in particular. It's worth highlighting because what he was playing around in that situation didn't really come to fruition. But having now paid closer attention to the quest proc and knowing where he was on his line, there was a turn where he chose to play the Cult Neophyte instead of playing a Pirate, right? And that was very important for 2 reasons. Firstly, it interrupted the quest progress for GivePLZ on a very key turn, right? That's the obvious part. Cult Neophyte, stop them playing spells. Maybe they don't get to complete quest this turn. That happened. However, what it also meant is that he didn't end the turn with Captain Rakara in hand, whereas if he'd have played the Pirate that turn, he would have done, which then gave him the opportunity on the next turn, when we'd lost track of whether he was on 0 or 1 proc out 2 on the quest, to just play a 2-mana Pirate and then play out the Captain Rakara from there to be able to play around that glide. That glide that we then saw stuck in GivePLZ's hand for just about the entire game after that point. After he cast the first one, second one appeared, wasn't able to get good value out of it. So even though it looked like a very straightforward game, there was a disaster scenario, a loss condition that GiaoT played around in that mid game by just navigating through things with that Cult Neophyte tech, the little pet tech that he has brought into that deck. He showed the world how to put it to good use in that matchup right there.
Did you notice at the end there, when he played the captain, he put it in the right positioning? I mean, he's winning the game. Your opponent doesn't have another turn, but he put the captain next to the Rakara, so there are 2 things on either side of the Juggernaut. Just obviously completely automatic. It was really amusing to me.
Nice.
All right, XiaoT onto his Demon Hunter now. Basically the same. There's a Viper missing. There's a Need for Greed. I think that's the only difference, although I am renowned for being able to not play a Spot the Difference.
No, that looks about right to me. Yeah, 1 roster up Viper for 1 Need for Greed looks about the only difference to my eyeballs as well. But primarily the same deck, and it's going to be the Druid now for GivePLZ. You shouted this out. You said this was probably the best route for the Druid out of the series. That is absolutely true. This is kind of the exact opposite counterpart to the Warlock matchup that we just saw, where the Token Druid part of the deck, sure, no problem. Demon Hunter can deal with that. You know, you play Glowfly Swarm, they play Immolation Aura, we move on with our lives, and nothing was achieved on this day. However, as soon as you play Celestial Alignment, your Demon Hunter opponent is in an absolute world of pain, because long gone are the days where Skull of Gul'dan, for example, might be able to find you a way to scam yourself out of that situation, because to even, after Celestial Alignment, to even get down like Il'gynoth, Moarg, Arcanist, Fellscream Blast, right? That's going to be 5 mana. That's also only going to be 36 damage. So by the time your opponent's played Solar Cenarian Ward 7 times on the other side, it's not going to be anywhere close to actually being able to get lethal. So this can tend to be a very favored matchup for the Druid overall. They have the perfect combination of disruption and armor gain to make life a living hell for the Demon Hunter. But speaking of disruption, Demon Hunter do have the king of all disruption cards in Glide, and through that all things can be possible, because that can sometimes make a real mess of a Celestial Alignment hand for the Druid as well, right? Because the cards that go back into the deck, that is, you know, considered backwards progress, and the rules in Hearthstone say that when things make backwards progress, they lose enchantments. So that means they go back into the deck at full cost, at which point they are drawn again and unplayable.
I've been making backward progress on ladder for years. So, GivePLZ there. Something I wanted to highlight about the Druid deck in his opening hand. I was trying to assess while you were talking whether he's playing the... whether he's drawn... Which half of the deck has he drawn? And the answer was both and neither, which is sort of a testament to the versatility of this deck. All of those cards in his opening hand could very easily, not counting the overgrowths because they're just ridiculous, could very easily have just contributed to both sides. But he has got the hand he wants now. He's going to have that huge amount of ramp and the alignment ready to go with card draw to boot.
Yes, the last couple of cards he picked up, Overgrowths and Celestial Alignments, have really given him a very clear game plan, and crucially the game plan that he wants specifically in this matchup. So XiaoT is going to be very much on a clock here, I would say. Choosing here to perfectly complete the step 1 of the quest as opposed to over-completing it, as he could have done there with the Spectral Sight. Now by lining up his Sigil of Alacrity on the following turn, he may just feel like he can complete again with that discounted Spectral Sight. And I always think that's kind of an interesting breakpoint on certain turns. Would you rather have a discounted card draw on a following turn, or would you rather over-complete on this turn to get one more discounted card right now? But I think having a nice cheap Spectral Sight is probably the right call for XiaoT in this spot.
I think since the quest was released, I think we've slowly seen a transition that most people are just trying to desperately not over-complete. The deck's got tighter. It's not got worse, but it's got more difficult to be accurate, and overdrawing, drawing too many cards has been punished more and more in later versions of the deck, I think.
Yeah, and I know we use this phrase quite often in exchanges between ourselves, but some of the training wheels have come off the Demon Hunter, right? Like some of those cards that were nice luxuries to have, but are kind of surplus to requirements, like Philosophy, for example, yes, have now been chopped out of the deck, which, as you say, do make things a little bit tighter overall.
And I think that's just general with Hearthstone. Decks get more powerful if you take the training wheels off. It's just a case of being good enough to take them off. Even the very best players on release day make terrible, terrible mistakes, like all over their broadcasts. So it takes a little while to know what you can cut and what you can get away with.
I'm fairly sure that analogy does hold up now, because correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't learn to ride a bike until I was about 27, but if you take the training wheels off your bike, you probably are going to go faster, right? So I'm fairly sure that analogy does check out.
It's a good analogy. I think it's the one, I may have used it first. That's why I like it so much.
Okay.
Finally, yes, claim to fame. Use a phrase that's been in use for hundreds of years first.
I learned to ride a bike where I was with some friends in San Francisco, and they started making fun. They were like big BMXers around San Francisco. It's kind of it's a hipster thing in the Mission District, San Francisco. Everyone rides BMXs. And they were making fun of me because I couldn't ride a bike, and they were like, okay, just learn it right now. And like, have you ever seen like the movie representation of San Francisco where they just had those giant intimidating hills? It was literally on one of those, and they're like, just get on the bike, it's easy. And it turns out it kind of is, to be honest.
Like learning to ride a bike.
It's just like riding a bike, yeah.
Can you remember? Like, do you forget how to ride a bike, or do you just get back on the bike?
No, it is. It's just like riding a bike. You never forget.
Excellent. Right, the alignment has been aligned, and so the game begins in earnest, or wherever the players are living right now. Made a real mess of everything, hasn't it? You sort of described it a lot more eloquently at the start, but a giant mess is actually how this Demon Hunter hand looks right now.
This is why we're such a good team. Like, I can throw as much information out there as I like, and people might listen to that and go, wow, there's a lot of information. I really enjoyed that. But there might be some people sat at home thinking, I wish he was just more succinct. Like, I wish he could just distill what's happening into one 3 or 4 word phrase. And then you come along, he's just made a giant mess, hasn't he? Yep, no, that's pretty much everything I said in the first 5 minutes of this game. Yeah, you got it.
It's just the recap ability.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Lunar Eclipse is handy, Innovate not so much, Germination, ambitious. This is interesting because he hasn't sort of got the normal Anaconda follow-up here, but he has got Arbor-ups and more mana and just everything you could want. So he's spoiled for nice choices here. Okay.
All right, well, that is the key card, through which things are possible, at least in this situation. Obviously, I did outline you do start coping really hard when you actually get Il'gynoth in hand in these situations. Because oh, surely I'm not that far away from lethal. And you remember how cumulative ones work, and then actually realise, yes, I'm miles away from getting a lethal in this position.
I only need 6 mana now. He's done me a massive favour.
Yeah,
but I have 2. Which mana is the cheapest for lethal here? Because you've got to assume you don't get Cenarion and you don't get killed.
Mm-hmm.
Which, pretty exciting assumptions to make.
Well, so either the 30 or the 36, whether that's either double Moog or double spell damage, quadruple spell damage, I guess would be the reasonable way to explain that, are 5 cards each, right? Depending on which way you do it. It's either Moog, spell damage, Il'gynoth, and a Fellscream Blast, or it's 1 Moog, 2 spell damage cards, Il'gynoth, and a Fellscream Blast. So 5 is the easy answer to give to that position, but yes, I think this is the conclusion that you eventually lead to, where you say, that's all hopeless. I'm never going to get there. By the time I get there, they're going to start playing Nourish and Discover Fungal Fortunes and everything else, and they'll just draw the other Celestial Alignment anyway and reset the whole thing, right? There's no chance this is ever going to happen. My best chance is to stick the Il'gynoth, connect that for 8 on the following turn, top deck a Moog, and then we'll go from there, right?
Does he need a Moog with the hand he has? Going to cut you off there. He's got double Arcanist and a Fellscream in hand if this somehow survives.
Yes.
That's a lot.
Which is +4 spell damage, but if there's no doubling, it does become very underwhelming overall. That's still only, 15 damage being represented.
Plus hit them for 9 on the board?
Yeah, 9 on the board is a big deal. I agree.
Still not enough, but I thought I'd test you.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process, save myself doing any counting or work.
Ah, look, the other alignment.
Play solar into alignment and reset everyone's mana infinite times. And then I wonder why I do badly. Okay.
Oh, interesting. He's not going to alignment this turn. I guess the way we've just broken it down, there's actually no real threat of lethal in this position, I suppose.
17, breakpoint's 18, right? If you hit the Moog there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. So Moog off the top would have been 18 from the Arcanist combo, right?
Sorry, I'm just shouted wait. He needs 4 mana to... You can unwait.
Okay. I have unboomed my dynamite.
8, 9, 17. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, you told me about this copium. I'm really, really getting into it right now.
Breathe deeply, Neil.
There's so much of it.
Just count backwards from 10 and let it take you under.
I don't know if I can manage that in my current state.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Not there, unless we've both lost it.
Yep, so he's going to be forced to AoE this turn, break up the combo that he has even further. But yeah, just going back, before Lorinda started driving me mad by making up whatever numbers he was making up, I did find that decision interesting because when the other alignment was drew, I said, oh, there's the other alignment. I thought that, could have potentially simplified things in that position. Because he could have, for example, done something like Glowfly, Arbor Up, end the turn with Celestial Alignment, right? And then that would have made the huge board on the other side. There wouldn't have been a threat of lethal in any world coming back on the other side with 1 mana. And even the one-off Immolation Aura, which was kind of the one and only card that you can play in response to that, wouldn't have really got anything done either. So I was a little bit surprised perhaps that GivePLZ did give an option over to XiaoT in that spot, but it's worked out fine for him in the end. He's going to now start dropping the goods, Germinations coming down, Cenarian War coming down, and now the alignment comes down for the final nail in the coffin, but it was a final nail in the coffin that was very much not required in the spot that GivePLZ was in because the Il'gynoth had already been killed in that spot anyway.
Yeah, good luck making your 2/4s and 3/5s if you can even make a 3/5 anymore. Get through this lot in time to do anything without your Il'gynoth. But I do agree on the alignment play. I was aware of it and sort of talked over you because that's kind of what I do. It did look like it was almost impossible to clear up anyway, and even if it was cleared up, your opponent has 2 mana the next turn and you just make another board of things.
This is one of those spots, and you were talking about this on Twitter yesterday, where, GivePLZ is doing exactly the right thing. This is a, why are you still in my game situation? XiaoT is continuing to play Hearthstone in a situation where there is no Hearthstone left to be played.
I think that was the longest period of time I've ever been quiet when I've not been talking about dinosaurs. I just couldn't think of anything to say about, yes, Sottle, how does he win this game of Hearthstone? He's really invested in it. Nope, let's just talk about dinosaurs. It's the only way from this spot.
Nice! Okay, if that was all deliberately enginered comedic timing, XiaoT is a genius, and that is the greatest thing I've ever seen, but I don't necessarily think that was the case. But wait 75 seconds, play Talented Arcanist concede is objectively hilarious, and I love it so much.
That was great.
Yeah.
So he said 74 seconds deciding which of his cards to play just for a comedic effect. And he chose the right one. Pretty sure. But it does go to 2-1. The Druid is out of there. But unfortunately for GivePLZ, it got out of there. Maximum damage had already been done. So he is going to have to run the Gauntlet of the Hunter, which I do know is close against Demon Hunter. Refuse to believe it. And basically the Mirror. Although the Mirror is very slightly in XiaoT's favour as well, because he actually has the extra card draw, not a useless Viper. I guess you could word that the other way, that Viper is some damage that could end up on the board. But for me, the Need for Greed's quite a big step in the Mirror towards getting some advantage.
Yeah, I do think the number of tradable minions used to be a little bit more relevant in like Brute mirrors, for example, or Brute versus Fel, or Brute versus OTK, where quite often it would come down to that final Suicide Squad set of minions, right? Like the Fel Demon Hunter or the OTK Demon Hunter would just use everything they had, blowing up all of your Brutes and then staying at 30 out of range of the Lion's Frenzy lethal, and you'd have to get there with your Peddlers and your Rust-Rot Viper and your Guild Trader or whatever else you had. Like in that, it was a relevant situation, I think. Kind of an under-discussed relevant situation as well, but in straight-up Demon Hunter mirrors, no, I don't think it's going to be a huge factor, and you would favour the extra card draw in most situations, I would imagine. Remember, it's not as much extra card draw as you might think it is on the surface, because Viper is still a tradable card, which is very useful, and in fact, in some situations, 1 mana draw 1 just fits the interval that you want for your quest better than 3 mana draw 3, right? Particularly if it comes off the top halfway through a chain. So one is not necessarely strictly better than the other.
Oh
no, what am I talking about?
The Need for Greed.
You can still trade with the greed, but yeah, forget about all of that. That's utter nonsense. I apologise.
Well, I was going to cut you off, and you started to talk about the relevance of having the minion on board, so I didn't cut you off, and then you went down the rabbit hole that I also cut myself off from at the start of that conversation. So
Oh, good.
It was a good moment, was had by all.
It's fine. I'm here to throw for you, Lorindo. It's okay.
One part of my job I should be able to do by now. Throwing for the other casters. Right. Need for Greed getting traded away. Why is this Arcanist in play?
Because it is.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, just hand position, making sure things come out from the left-hand side, keeping outcast options open, keeping your hand size low. So if there's a lot of things going on, but basically the answer on all fronts is glide. Your own glide, your opponent's glide, just getting the card on board, setting up your own outcast, keeping your hand size low, making sure your glide can get into a good position, making sure you have less cards in hand to be punished by your opponent's glide, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, because I've been talking all tournament really about how you can't afford to waste combo pieces anymore, but one thing you're not short on is spell damage. Doubling that spell damage you're short on, actual winning the game damage you're sometimes short on, but you've got plenty of these things, so that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, Moargs are infinitely more valuable than the spell damage minions, for sure. Where each spell damage minion is just a lump of rusty iron, and your Moargs are just pure 24-karat gold, right? You have to protect those with your life, and particularly in this kind of matchup where it's a straight-up race to that combo.
Lump of rusty iron. Right, who has the better card draw? XiaoT has picked up the Need for Greed early, which isn't really when you want it, but with the hand he currently has, might be incredibly tempted just to play the card.
Oh, the situation complicates.
Does, because now he can draw the cards and tradable the Need for Greed, which seems somewhat better.
Wait, what? You can trade Need for Greed?
Yeah, right. So when you do, you spend 1 mana, and it goes back into your deck, and you get a different card, in theory, as he's only playing 1, so he actually will definitely get a different card. There we go. Thank you, game, for explaining that to us. There we go. Quest part 2 done.
Yeah, and he's being consistently very optimal with these, the choices of which cards he's using on his Demon Hunter quest completion turns, because he's really favouring having discounts carried over to the next turn as opposed to anything else, right? So
yep.
He preserved the weapon there because he had 1 mana to spend on that turn. There's no real reason to swing the weapon in that position and then trade something after the fact, because that's kind of 1 wasted mana. He now has 0 mana draw a card still available from the weapon swing on the following turn, and he also, where possible, tried to avoid using the cards he was drawing on the same turn. So that double jump, for example, was not what he used for the final card draw. Just making sure he has this maximum draw potential set up turn after turn after turn. Wants to be as uninterrupted as possible on all fronts.
Something that always fascinates me in the mirror is looking after Kurtas. We've talked about it with when it's not a mirror and your opponent can get around it because they can play a Pirate and a Rokara together, for instance. But it's almost impossible in the mirror to do that. And we've seen time and again people glide away each other's Kurtases and some sort of horrible top deck wars taken place. And with that in mind, preserving all of your good draw spells is absolutely crucial if you do get into that horrible phase where you're just both limping for a top deck.
Yeah, even if you're being ambitious, right? Like, how much mana can you spend and draw 5 cards? Like, 4 if you're lucky, right? So then you need 5 mana to play the Kurtrus after the fact. So we're saying turn 9 you're going to play your Kurtrus if you're going to play around Glide. You're dead, buddy, at that point. Like, your opponent has just played their Kurtrus and killed you at that point. So it's absolutely not realistic to do the same turn quest reward in this situation. And generally, we do see Kurtrus glidden back into the deck with a far higher frequency than any other quest reward in the game.
With that in mind, it's absolutely crucial to do what XiaoT has done here and be the first glider. You're the one in control of where the cards were in your hands to that point. And if you're the first glider, the other person is kind of relying on just getting the glide in the optimal position off your glide. So big advantage to be the one who does that first.
Yeah, he had to make a call as to whether he had the initiative there or not, right? Because if you're going to make the initiative play, if you say, I'm ahead, I'm going to do the damaging thing here, you just play your glide, as you were saying, you get your Kurtrus in hand, and you also... Oh, hold on, hold that thought. Misses it! No! Oh... There's the
so
salty
close.
boy we were waiting to see, Lorinda. There he is. Oh, no, he's back to sleep again. Never mind. Okay. But yeah, just to finish that thought, so he chose to glide away the hand from the opponent to absolutely minimize the amount of chances that there was for disruption on the other side. What you can do is go the other way, and because he'd engineered that glide into the far side of his hand already, he can just wait and be the defensive player instead, right? And wait for his opponent to complete the quest and then play his glides to shuffle it back in. The players are now caught up with where we were about 15 seconds ago. XiaoT gets the news that he gets to keep his Demon Slayer Kurtrus, and now I think GivePLZ might just be beginning to resign himself to defeat, because think of what he gave up. Like, yes, he got a Stelina that turn, but what did it cost him? Everything, Neil, because he did not complete a quest step that turn. He turned it down to get that Stelina into play, and without hitting the Kurtrus, that means he's now, what, minimum 2 turns behind the game now.
Yeah, and 2 turns is the limit. You can get away with it occasionally, 3 turns, or basically you can't. And 2 turns, even that is a little bit optimistic, but I like to be optimistic. So you know me a long time, I'm always the cheerful life of the party. Oh, hang on, that's someone else. That's right, don't worry about it. Right. I'm not sure why GivePLZ, I think he's still recovering, right? Because I'm not sure why he was surprised. There's a curse, you didn't hit it with your Stelina, yeah. That's why it's there. And we can see that XiaoT hasn't got much going on. The double jump could get that second Spectral Sight, I believe, if I counted correctly.
Yeah, I think so.
But actually, there is a chance that he just doesn't draw anything for 2 or 3 turns here. The GivePLZ needs to keep himself together here.
Another happy guildie.
Alright. So there's the 2 turns. And now XiaoT just needs to pick up anything that draws cards in the next turn or 2. It's where he protected that need for greed earlier as well. That could turn out to be a big deal now.
It's so many card draws in reality, though, right? Like, he gets to rip the double jump. He does hit the I-beam here, but now, even still, he has the natural draw at the start of the turn, which whiffed. That hit Fell Screen Blast. He had the double jump, which whiffed. That hit I-beam. But now he still has swing into tradable as well. And surely it can't whiff 3 times in a row, right?
Well, we're
Right?
2/3 of the way there. He has, although I say he's whiffed. He's not far off lethal with a swing with Kurtrus and the weapon here. And then next turn, everything.
Yeah, 6+6+7 currently, right? 19, I count.
Yeah, and if we're saying he's whiffing on card draw next turn, what's he drawing?
Right. A spell damage minion. Or a
Right, basically, yeah.
I mean, that's basically the deck, right? It's lifesteal spells, spell damage minions, things that are tradable, and card draw. And basically all 4 of those categories are going to kill GivePLZ next turn if they're drawn.
It's literally going to have to be sort of tradable into tradable into tradable into, oh my goodness, not another tradable. Oh wow, where's all my mana gone? Pass once. And
Right.
then he still has to actually die.
Even then, the tradable minions say spell damage +2 on them. So, I mean, that even sounds pretty good to me in that situation.
Good point. Well made.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can't get to the glide even here. In the world where he wanted to panic.
And, like, you know, the small window to at least stay alive for another turn or 2 is to take a big heal back up to 30 in this position with an I-beam. But then you're not playing Kurtrus. You're also committing combo pieces to the board. So you then have to have yet another turn where you have to spend 5 mana on Kurtrus. And then another turn after that where you probably have to go full cycle to draw the rest of your deck and find all of the other combo pieces that you still need. Like, GivePLZ is just so far away from even a survival condition here, let alone a win condition.
And every time I've seen this come back from the dead, it has been close your eyes, play Kurtrus, and hope you're not dead. That just seems to be almost always correct. It always also looks terribly wrong, as XiaoT is going to advance to those semi-finals, but I think this is always the way where you give yourself that small chance of getting out of trouble.
Yep, 6+6+7 was the count last turn, 6+6+7 was the count this turn as well. As it turns out, he literally drew Sigil of Alacrity, which was the one card outside of those definitions that we talked about on the previous turn, but he had just the amount of damage he needed to get himself over the line. 19 damage clean, another series in the books for XiaoT, and personally, I would be super happy to see XiaoT making the run all the way through this one and picking up a victory. I think it's been a much deserved, a long awaited, a long overdue victory for XiaoT to win one of these big global tournaments, you know, a tournament that's directly within the eye line of, you know, the English speaking, the Western Hearthstone scene, because he is just that good.
Yep, I can't dispute any of that. And once again, I have failed to predict the winner.
Oh, did you pick GivePLZ?
I did, yeah.
You picked XiaoT's opponent, Lorinda. Like, how bad?
I mean, they're all going to be XiaoT's opponents at some point, right? I thought I'd get it over with early.
Ah, yeah, fair enough. Okay.
I can't handle your tormenting me all day, so I just thought we'll just do it in the quarterfinals, just get rid of it. And he's
Enough.
going to be up against Tianming, who looks, from when we have last had a look at Tianming, he's always been decent.